Yes, my name is Hans. I'm from the company Porterplay, and as you have found out, I talk after Asta, Frank, and Matt because I'm also typically arrives in the process after they have been fooling around. So I'm the guy who gets all these good ideas and these good stories and try to bring them down to something which can be realized, and then I realize it, and then I have to fucking track how it performs. Because I'm the guy who is responsible for whoever gives the money to show some kind of effect. So I am a bit strange hybrid. I'm a creative director who are very modern technology. I'm a creative director who are very concerned with numbers. Basically, what I want to talk about is stickiness / accessibility / how the fuck do we keep the users when we have the first touch point with our universe. Because we all love cross-platform, I avoid the word, we all love branching content, and I think we do it because we love the illusion of freedom, the illusion of interactivity, though it is of course very restrained interactivity. The more cross-platform it is, the more it reminds us of our real life, our daily life, where we interact with different media, with different physical and virtual media. So of course the involvement is greater the more platforms are used, or the more locations are used, or the more branching content there is in our straight digital game. In the early days, how did we do branching content? Well, I didn't do it, but somebody did. Good example is the old Fallout and more 2D graphics text-based games. It was very easy to do branching content, to do content that wasn't used by everybody, because it was just writing text and small snippets of codes. It was really easy, it was not that expensive. Then came the days of 3D graphics and everything had to be sexy. Mass Effect is a very good example. It was a great game. No matter what you did, you got like different kind of scripted, interactive 3D sequences with voice acting and animations, and your character looked like you designed it. It was just an abundance of content, and every game session was different, even though you reloaded the game. How did they do that? Well, they did it with brute force approach. They had a lot of money. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have those budgets. So basically, when we do content, the big companies, they do a lot of content, and then the users see a little bit of it, and it's okay because they have the money for it. And that's the selling point. When we do productions, God damn it, I'll try to be more economical with my content here on the screen. When we do content, we usually have this much content. If the user only sees a tiny bit, then we waste a lot of money, and maybe they won't have that much experience time. So that means, how can we solve that, or how can we avoid an unsatisfying user experience because we spread our content too thin? A very good case is a product which was a kind of ARC thing with some a mobile application and some 2D barcodes on a cereal product. Widespread in whole Denmark. I don't know, 500,000 people maybe got this cereal box, and then saw this 2D QR code, and then they could download an application, and then they could scan the 2D code, and then the application would open, and then we'll start downloading some content, and then after 5 to 10 minutes it said, now I've downloaded content. If you go out to this location, then you will see the content. So basically, we have the first rule. That's the rule of osmosis, we call it. Digital products are not viral. They are osmosis. That means they are not flown through the air. You have to touch them to take them to you. And this rule of osmosis says the 50-70 rule, which basically means, this goes, no, I know, this goes really great. The osmosis failed because there's a layer of stuff in between, which basically means that your first touch point, your first call to action, only 5% will react on that. Afterwards, each phase you have, which are troublesome, only 70% will react to that, approximately. That means this product, which was seen, this call to action, which was seen by 500,000 persons, it was downloaded by 5%, because it was a process to download it. That is 25,000. Then, after downloading it, that was the call to get the link to download it. Then 60% or 70% approximately actually downloaded it. So that's like 60,000. Then 60% or 70% of those actually downloaded all the extra content because that costed money. That was before flat rate. So that was 11,000. Then you had to drive somewhere or walk somewhere to scan a 2D code to activate the content. That's a troublesome action. Only 5% did that. So now we're down to 500 users from 500,000. Then they drove to the location. Then they had to scan this 2D code. 70%. Now we're down to 300 users. They saw content. 300 of the possible 25,000 users who were activated actually saw some content. And that was the first content. Then to see the second piece of content, they had to drive somewhere else. That's 5% of those. Then we're down to 25. And those who scanned it were 16. So 16 out of 25,000 saw 2 pieces of content. There was 10 locations.
And how expensive was that?
At least 500,000 Danish kroner, I think. And I mean, there was 10 locations, so the few users saw 10% of the content. Very few users saw 20% of the content. Some of the content were never viewed. We made a game ourselves, Portaplay. In the early days, we made a whole multiplayer engine. We made multiplayer mobile games. That was in the early days when it was very hard to do. We had like 100,000 who saw our advertisements for the games. 5,000 of them downloaded it. But there was only multiplayer content in the first game, so they had to send it to a friend who had to download it and so on, which meant from the 5,000 who downloaded, only 100 got to play with a friend. The next game we did, of course, had some single-player content, because we went from 5,000 people who opened the app to 100 who played it, and that was like a major fault. So our second game had a lot of single-player content, and then they could also play multiplayer. The rule of osmosis is basically beware, because every time you have a phase change, like a phase in your experience, or every time you have a change in the physical media or change in what you have to do, you lose a lot of users.
Yeah. You mean by that moving, for example, from one screen to another?
Yeah, example. So you really have to take care when you're doing this. And that's the second rule. That's a rule of fun at once. I don't know if it was Funcom who made it, but I heard it from Thomas Howald from Funcom. He had another rule with numbers. It was the 30, 30, 30, and 30 rule, which basically means that the first 30 seconds you have to have fun. The first 30 minutes you have to have fun, the first 30 days, and the first 30 months. And the fun has to be different. You have to have a development arc in what you experience. But if you don't catch people the first 30 seconds, then you don't catch them all. Our games who had only multiplayer, we lost a lot of people because they couldn't play the first 30 seconds because they had to play against a friend. This application with 0 products lost people totally. So you always have to have the content available at once. It has to catch people, and you have to be very aware of the steps that you force the user to take because you lose them along the way. Some might say, I look at one now, that the number of users might not be the critical issue, but it's the impression that you make on people. That is correct. But when you do stuff for money, then it is the number of persons who use it, which are very important. When you do stuff funded in another way, then you can do it in another way. You can't go for quality and not quantity, but that is a rare thing to have. It's very rare that you can afford that luxury, I would call it. Then there's a third rule, which is the rule of the modular narrative. if you have a linear sequence of experience, and you have a cross-media product or a decentralized content, then you will have a chance that if this is the content, that if people come in midway through the process, they will lose something. Or if they, in the example of the fall drop-off rate of users, if they don't come to the end of the experience, they will lose a lot of the narrative. Another typical way of doing cross-media experience is like go out on the streets and find something on the streets and activate it, and then you get some piece of a story, and then you can go somewhere else and get another piece of the story, which has a challenge that if you have some physical thing that points to somewhere where you can get an experience, then you have a touch point. If you have 10 locations in a metropole where you can like go up and scan something and then get a piece of story, and it's only the first node where it makes sense to start, then all people who are not aware of your product, who goes and then sees number 3 or 4 in the chain of modules, they will jump in a story which doesn't make sense, and then it will stop again. Another thing is if you have like a long story and you start from node 1 and you have a drop-off rate, then a lot of users won't have a satisfying story arc because they will stop midway in the story. There's been a lot of products in Denmark where we use mobile phones for experiencing stuff like text using SMS service or going into a website and hearing an audio clip or video clip. And almost all of them, a lot of the audience saw the first one, but then there was a massive drop-off rate, meaning that not only did we lose some content, but the ones who actually saw the first node didn't get the full experience because they needed the rest of the story to have it like feel like a closed experience. So what we always do, if we can, is we make all content self-sustained, and we make the content able to communicate to each other and to interact in what you do one place affects what you do in another place, and so on and so on. But every platform and every experience session has to be closed in its own way and satisfying. That is our methodology. Well, that was that. Sorry for speed talking.